Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. The time right now is 11:39 a.m. East Coast time, Monday, September 23rd. And I want to take, since the salaries, right, we have some bye weeks, but the salaries, 12-game slate out for next Sunday, NFL Week 4. I want to take a first look, sort of inspired when I first did all of this stuff. Like a year ago, right, was when I started all this and all this analysis, hopefully beneficial to some of you. I did this starting just watching like Al Seinfeld's videos, right? Everybody knows Al, fantastic guy. Got a chance to interact with him a little bit on the social media platforms. And yeah, a little bit inspired by him. I think this is a fun concept. I think it's just a nice way to kind of get a first look and like my actual reaction of what's happening in the salaries. I haven't looked at anything. Like obviously I see this top tier of quarterback pricing just because it's the first thing that pops up when you open up the salaries. But I want to build a lineup that, in terms of like a cash lineup, a little bit something that you can have security around, because obviously there's so many more players that you can have in a player pool for GPPs as opposed to cash. You're not going to have more than a few players per position that you want to get into a lineup. So we'll start from there. My first reaction. Welcome if you're here for the first time. I do cover daily fantasy sports in the NFL, MLB, WNBA, and NBA streets. Really appreciate it. Week 3 was a very good week for me. A couple of things some people are saying I missed on Preston Williams. I would argue that that's a big no. He saw 12 targets. He dropped a touchdown. 3 catches for 60 yards in a GPP at 3,700 is clearly not something that you want. But when you have 12 targets, and if you told me he would see 12 targets and 3 red zone targets, I would have signed up for that all day. So thought that was fine. The funniest comment that I've seen so far is that, and this was actually a serious person, that I was wrong for saying Ezekiel Elliott over Tony Pollard last week. Not even a troll. Like that was a person having a conversation with me, pointing out that that's a spot where I was wrong. So I don't know what to tell you on that one. Yeah, I'm going to recommend Zeke over his backup running back against Miami, probably more times than not. Yeah, but we'll get into this one. This is just going to be a fun video, right? By the time Thursday comes, there might be some of these players just injured or other players open up. And it's something that this is my first time looking at it. If you can build a better first look lineup after looking at it for the first time, that's fantastic, honestly. But if you're going to look at it for like 2 days and then come back here and be like, Sal, how'd you miss this? It's my first time looking at it. Calm down. I'm going to be looking at this for like 15 minutes on camera. And then obviously I'm going to be looking at it a lot more as the week goes on. I get it into my spreadsheets. So let's get into this on a first look lineup. Hopefully you all had a great weekend. Hopefully you all are ready for week 4. I'm filming this on Monday, which is by far the best day of the week because you get to start the week off fresh, not just for DFS, but everything in life. So I appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button. We're about to hit 10,000 subscribers. We're now less than 300 people away from that, 300 subscribers. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate each and every one of you positive people. So thank you. Let's get into it. We'll start with the quarterback position. Let's see what we got going on. Patrick Mahomes, highest priced quarterback. Nothing surprising there. Just continues to throw for 350 yards and like 3 to 4 touchdowns a week. Exactly what he did last week was 374 and 3 touchdowns. Just ridiculous. The week before that, he went for like 280 and 4 touchdowns and a quarter. This guy's just nuts. Hasn't even needed to use his legs at all this year and still dropping 30 burgers each and every week. So in cash, I'm really not going to prioritize the Patrick Mahomes. They might not have Darius Slay, the Lions this week. It seems like he's going to be uncertain already. So that's actually very favorable, right? That just lets players get loose on the outside a little bit more. But it's just if you want to pay for it. I don't. I think you could usually find quarterbacks that are better for $1,500 less or even more. Lamar Jackson, at home now, second highest priced. Had a little bit of a subpar week. He's fine if you want to get to him. But again, same analysis as I don't really spend up. As I look through this, Deshaun Watson is probably like the best quarterback in like all of fantasy, if I'm being honest with you. He just needs an offensive line. Like the guy's just getting hit way too many times. In a week last week where it seemed like nothing was happening for his offense, he still goes for 30 fantasy points. Hasn't even needed to like open it up on the ground yet with his legs. He did week 1. He ran in that long touchdown. 21-yard run, rushing touchdown against New Orleans. But this guy's just fantastic. Like, if I can build a fantasy lineup every single week and not have to worry about salary, obviously Patrick Mahomes is fantastic, but like, Patrick Mahomes breaks all like models, right? If you take off Patrick Mahomes, like Deshaun Watson is just so good in terms of what he can do with his legs. He just needs more time. This is a 30 fantasy point a week player if he just has a decent offensive line, which he doesn't have. I'm not going to get there this week, but it is a fine spot as it seems. Rivers against Miami, 6,200. That has to stand out to you, right? We just saw Dak Prescott light them up. We've seen everybody who's played Miami so far has lit them up. We saw Dak Prescott. We saw Tom Brady even doing it to an extent, 25 points against them, still throwing touchdowns in the fourth quarter of that game. We saw Lamar Jackson just go bonkers. So obviously a fine spot for Rivers if you want to get there at 6,200. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm going to get to this guy right here because I'm seeing him right now. Russell Wilson at 6,100 against Arizona. We saw Kyle Allen destroy, effectively too. Only like 27 pass attempts are in the 20s, had 4 touchdown passes, just destroy Arizona's defense. It's terrible and still not going to have Patrick Peterson. We saw Matt Stafford have a career day week 1 against this Arizona defense. We've just seen quarterback after quarterback go in there and just dominate this Arizona Cardinals defense. Every team that comes in is going to get to play up in pace, probably have 1 to 2 more possessions as a team just against this terrible defense. So you're seeing Russell Wilson at 6,100, and I'm just laughing at that price point because it's too cheap. This guy has looked fantastic. Like, they're using his legs again. 7 rushes for 51 yards last week. 2 rushing touchdowns. That's already 2 times more than he had all of last year. So he's actually using his legs once again. As you can see, if he's adding like an extra 2 to 4 points on the ground, which I expect him to do week in and week out, especially now that they're realizing that they have playmaking ability there, that's good. That's upside. And now you get not only Tyler Lockett going out of the slot and out wide against an Arizona defense that Tyler Lockett, the matchup is just fantastic. You also get DK Metcalf on the outside, and all he does is run go routes. We've seen all he does is catch big plays, go routes, touchdowns, or just long, deep passes. Caught a 54-yard pass before the half last week. It's just a really good spot because now you have a field stretcher in Metcalf, which is what they've been kind of missing, right? They had Tyler Lockett performing that role last year, but Lockett excels a lot more in the slot. So it looks really good overall. There'll be another Seattle player that I'm going to be looking for the price point in Lockett and maybe some other ones because anybody against Arizona is just a fantastic matchup. So Russell Wilson at 6,100 seems fine. Maybe we get away from him if there's somebody cheaper that I like. Baker Mayfield's price drops against Baltimore. Look, the matchup for Baker, it's more so about their offense that's concerning. But like Baker's matchup, Baltimore, if Jimmy Smith's out again, it's not that scary of a matchup, this secondary. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is going to light up any secondary, but Jimmy Smith is a real concern when he's not out there for the Ravens. So keep an eye on that injury. He's missed the last couple of weeks. Jameis against the Rams. I don't want to go back to Jameis this week, although I loved him last week against the Giants. It's just a very favorable spot against the Giants. Who faces the Giants this week? Josh Allen against New England at home. Any team going into Buffalo, it's a tough spot, but obviously New England hasn't allowed a touchdown all year. They look scary. I don't want to mess around with that. Case Keenum. $4,900 for Case Keenum is interesting. Not cash-based, but I'll just mention that the Giants are still like the worst in the league in terms of their secondary right now. I don't believe we have Cincinnati on this slate, so that's another really bad secondary that we can attack. Yeah, they're not on this slate, so Arizona's the one that I'll go with. I'm not going to go to Case Keenum. He plays tonight, depending on when you're watching this, against the Bears. I expect him to just look terrible because the Bears' front is that great, and they have a decent secondary in terms of their safeties, not so much their cornerbacks. But Case Keenum can be an interesting tournament play at $4,900 next week. But let's just stick to Russell Wilson right now because for cash, I really like that. Running backs. I mean, I'm just going to do this and see what happens, right? On a slate where it doesn't seem like Saquon's going to play, he already is appearing doubtful on Draftkings, which is usually they don't do that soon, but it seems like a high ankle sprain. They're saying that he's going to miss some time, so it doesn't seem like he'll play this week. So you don't have him. You don't have Alvin Kamara on this slate. You don't have Zeke on this slate. So yeah, I do think that Christian McCaffrey is like obviously the clear main stud. Now Dalvin Cook has been playing like an absolute stud, right? Let's go to Dalvin Cook's game log. Just been playing like a monster. Like it's really hard to get away from him, except when you're on the road in Chicago. We'll probably see Chicago tonight just destroy anything that Adrian Peterson tries to do on the ground or Chris Thompson. Just a really tough spot to want to get to. Maybe in tournaments it's interesting because we know that they just want to run the ball and feed Cook. But worth mentioning, last week, Cook only saw 60% of the snaps. Alexander Mattison, the rookie, was also running the ball very well, seeing 30% of the snaps. Mike Boone came in and saw a decent amount of snaps, decent in terms of like 8% of the snaps as well. So Cook's still the main guy out there, but they do want to get Mattison in that Latavius Murray role. They've been saying that all year, and he's played twice this year, at least 30% of the snaps. So interesting to keep an eye on that. Probably don't get to Cook this week. Just a really tough matchup. Christian McCaffrey, it's not much to say. Doesn't matter who's out there. Now, he didn't get involved in the receiving game all that much last week, but he didn't have to. Broke off his longest touchdown ever on the ground, so that skewed a lot of the statistics, but he's a playmaking running back, so I can't say that's not going to happen. He's going to make plays every single week. Maybe not 76-yard rushes, but rushes that get you into the red zone and lead to more touchdown usage. He's played 100% of the snaps. Per Adam Levitan, Bonifant in the backfield, the backup running back, has played 4 snaps. No other running back has played a single snap yet. So, yeah, Christian McCaffrey is locked into every down work in a matchup against Houston that is a much weaker front now without Davian Clowney there. And we know what Christian McCaffrey can do in the receiving game. It's just a matter of what else can you get on this slate. And for me, there's no other main studs that I would want to target. Austin Eckler is priced up. Let's see if we can get to him. I don't believe, is there any guys priced? No, there's not. Or not priced, but when they're playing in the afternoon. It seems like they're all playing at 1 o'clock, these two so far, McCaffrey and, Miami. So I don't have to worry about putting anything in the flex for pivoting later on. But Eckler's expensive. His price has come up. But he's getting Miami, who's given up, I think, 236 rushing yards per game through the first 3 weeks of the season. 236. They gave up 195.5 through the first 2 games. Then Dallas came in and dropped like a 250-plus burger on their heads. Just absolutely ridiculous. I'll put Austin Eckler in here. Obviously, we don't have to stick with this because that's a lot of money to spend on 2 running backs, especially where Eckler's role on the ground isn't totally solidified, right? We've seen 2 weeks with 12 and 9 touches. That's not fantastic, but this is what I love, right? He's had 6 catches every single week. I'm still going to stick by what I said week 1 in that his receiving floor is like 4 receptions because they just want to throw to him so much in this funnel offense. Even in a week where we saw 15-plus targets again, I think 17 targets for Keenan Allen. Even in a week where we saw 17 targets for Keenan Allen, you still see Austin Eckler getting what you can rely on, like 6-7 targets out of him. So now you factor in they're facing Miami. You're factoring in that maybe Justin Jackson is a nice tournament play this week because they're not giving too much work to Eckler on the ground. But I do imagine that you're going to get a lot of touches. Maybe $8,000 is not the most favorable price point, but we'll come back to that. Let me throw in a defense, something that's cheap. I usually like to look at home favorites, right? Really no real home favorites here. This looks decent, right? 2,300 is cheap. Maybe it's too cheap, but it's just for the sake of this video. You get Carolina going to Houston, which isn't fantastic, a team on the road. But we know how bad Houston's offensive line is, so that allows for more sacks, which leads to more potential fumbles and more interceptions when a quarterback is rushed. So we'll put that in for right now and see what we can get. Let me put a tight end in. So tight ends, let's look at the top pricing. Travis Kelce, yeah, he's always fine. 7,200 just in terms of like these formats. I don't really want to get there. Evan Ingram looked fantastic on that like 75-yard touchdown run. Thank God he has a real quarterback. Danny Dimes, I have to say, looked amazing. Danny Dimes looked really, really good. The rushing upside for Danny Dimes, though, like it's going to hurt Saquon in terms of like season numbers. Yeah, week in and week out, it's not going to make Saquon not an elite running back, but like season numbers, Saquon's probably going to lose a couple rushing touchdowns as the year goes on. Obviously now that he's hurt, but just also with Daniel Jones being there, it's a lot better when somebody else is not mobile for a running back, right? Like Eli Manning, maybe it doesn't keep drives alive, but it doesn't pull away from your overall touchdown projection for the year, which is a lot when it comes to fantasy. Darren Waller's a monster. Like I want to put him in right now. 5,200 on the road going to Indy, which we know that there's a couple of defenses, Arizona, Indy, that just funnel to tight ends, and they can't stop tight ends. Indy is one of them. I was all over. I loved Austin Hooper. At the end of the week, if you're watching the live streams, if you're watching the final thoughts, he was my favorite tight end for lineup construction reasons, especially for cash. Ends up scoring 2 touchdowns. They just don't guard tight ends. This Indy team wants to funnel to tight ends. Darren Waller looks legit as it gets. Like he's going to be a $6,000 tight end. I tweeted very soon. 14 targets on 13 catches. He's doing, and he ran the ball for 7 yards. That's crazy. He's doing exactly what Jared Cook did in this offense last year, leading the team in receptions, targets, all this stuff once Amari Cooper left in this John Gruden offense, and Derek Carr favors tight ends. But now he's just more athletically gifted, in my opinion, than Jared Cook. He just gets separation. The guy looks fantastic. 5,200 is a price point that I think is fine for cash. In terms of like playing already 2 really expensive running backs, though, I feel like if we get 5,200, how much money do we have left over? $4,900 for a flex and 3 wide receivers. Like that seems thin, in my opinion. Like you're really struggling to get 3 cheap wide receivers and then maybe like an okay flex running back. So if I want to play these 2 expensive running backs, I don't know if I'll be able to get to Waller. Waller really looks good, so maybe you prioritize Waller over Eckler, but let's see what else we have. Mark Andrews dealing with injuries against Cleveland at home. Looks okay, but I don't know if I want to spend $5K for that. Delaney Walker has been very good, 4,800, leading his team in receptions, targets, all this stuff. I mean, he's the main target of Mariota. It's just a matter of Mariota's looked terrible, and getting drives to go towards the red zone where Walker really excels is a little bit worrisome. Austin Hooper, the guy that I love so much, he's now priced up, I believe. Yeah, his price comes up $700. The guy's just fantastic. Like, I was looking at it last year. He averaged 5.5 targets per game last year. He caught 80% of his balls, so he was catching 4 balls a game last year. And every single year, his target share comes up. And that's just what we're seeing this year. I mean, Matty Ryan's throwing a lot because their running game has been non-existent. Freeman looked good last week, but nothing fantastic in terms of like heavily relying on the run in a game that was very close / they were trailing. So, yeah, seeing Hooper get 7 more targets after having 9 and 6, like I really do think Hooper's floor, it was last year 5.5 targets a game. I do think his floor in targets is like 6, honestly. But I won't get there this week. Greg Olsen looked fantastic, but that was more so a factor of playing Arizona, in my opinion. The whole offense looked good. Kyle Allen looked like the new coming of, like, I don't even know, like Patrick Mahomes. Can we say that? Is that too soon to say Patrick Mahomes is that legendary? 6 catches for 7 yards, or 7 targets, 75 yards, 2 tutties. He just looked amazing. He's looked really good this year. Coming into this game, he ran the second most routes out of any tight end on the field for 90% of the snaps. He looks like legit, and it's crazy that these older tight ends are still playing so well, including him and like coming off injury too, him and Delaney Walker. What else do we have? Hunter Henry's still out. I think they lost Virgil Green as well, so that's not great. Eric Ebron, no interest. Any cheap tight ends that we can rely? Oh, baby. Oh, yeah. This might work. So this doesn't seem like safe in terms of cash. You saw what he did week 1 catch on 2 targets for 12 yards. But here's the thing. Arizona, he's by far the starting tight end on this team. 5 catches for 2 tutties in week 2. Got another tutty week 3. Scored a touchdown on 6 catches, 7 targets. Like, this is a very good last 2 weeks for Will Dissly. And now he's facing Arizona, who's just been dominated by tight ends, like dating back to last year, but also this year. We just saw Greg Olsen. We were just looking at his game log, right? Had 6 catches for 70-plus yards and 2 touchdowns. So what we need out of $3,600 Will Dissly is not that much. We already have his quarterback. Like, I'm not trying to stack, so don't think, oh, Sal, you're not supposed to stack in cash. I know you're not. But if it lands on that and you feel good with it, then it's fine. Like, I'm not going out of my way to stack Russell Wilson with his tight end here. But this is a really favorable matchup for a guy who's running a lot of routes. If you look at his yards per route run, it's good. More so just his routes run. His snap percentage is up there. He's by far the leading tight end on this team. Suffered last year with an injury, which kind of cut a season that early on looked as it is this year short. But yeah, Will Dissly, 3,600. Like, I don't know if I securely trust this play, but the tight end matchup against Arizona makes me like it just that much more. They just can't guard tight ends. Like, their overall defense is terrible, but when you do that, you get $5,300 per player instead of $4,900. And honestly, per player, having an extra $400, that's a lot of money because we can get to some more favorable spots. So let's look what we got at wide receiver. Again, Will Dissly, not this thing I feel the safest about, but for $3,600, if I get 5 to 6 targets out of a tight end, as we've seen the last 2 weeks, I think I'm okay with that. Let's see what we get out of wide receivers, gang. Top end, Julio, should be expensive, way too cheap last week. DeAndre Hopkins been struggling for a few weeks, mainly because Deshaun Watson doesn't have that much time, but fine there. Keenan Allen, price tag comes up because look at this. He's like the best fantasy wide receiver by like 20 points right now. It's insane. Look at the targets. 42 targets through 3 weeks. Holy cow, this man is just so good. Insane, 46 points he dropped last week. All right, so last week was a profitable week. Doubled my money, but in my one lineup in one of my 3 maxes, the $150 buy-in, this is the biggest, like, it kept me up at night type of thing. I took out Keenan Allen and Dalvin Cook for Ezekiel Elliott and Chris Carson once the news came out. It was like 35 minutes before lock. Talk about tinkering, right? Ended up losing me about $2,500. Just rough. In that lineup, I still doubled my money, won about $300 for that specific lineup, or whatever like the buy-in next level up was. And it would have been like $2,500. It would have finished top 15 that lineup instead of like making the second tier of cashing. Absolutely brutal when you're on that guy all week in that lineup, and then 30 minutes before you're like, you know what, Chris Carson's going to see 25 touches, and then he fumbles and gets benched. So what can you do? Keenan Allen, somebody that I want to prioritize, see if I can get him into this lineup. We'll see about it. I'm not sure if we'll actually be able to fit him into this lineup. Seeing some messages from the girlfriend right now. All is well. But yeah, we'll see if we can fit him in. How much money? We only have 45.33. That's not bad. You have to find a really cheap wide receiver though. So we'll see about that. Mike Evans' price shoots back up $500 as it should. He looked fantastic last week. Towards the end of the week, I love Mike Evans over Godwin just because of they both had the same amount of air yards, same amount of overall like opportunities from a deep play perspective, and he was getting Janoris Jenkins. So I favored him in the live stream and a couple other things. Cooper Kupp's a legit wide receiver number 1. Like, this guy's fantastic. You're going to get 10 targets a week out of the guy, if not more. Coming out of the slot, he's the favorite target of Jared Goff. When they get to the red zone, he is by far the favorite target. He's just been fantastic. Week after week, his fantasy points have been like doubling. Absolutely nuts. 6,500 is a very favorable price point against Tampa Bay. We might want to try and fit that in. Let's see. $4,900 left. I actually don't think that's terrible, but again, I'm just thinking about like getting a running back in the flex if we can actually fit it. What else do we have? Tyler Lockett against Arizona. Whew. Boy, oh boy, is this hard not to like. Like, week 1 is just an outlier. He still scores a touchdown to salvage his day, but like this is what you're going to be seeing, like 10 targets plus for Tyler Lockett, especially Russell Wilson, Chris Carson. If he's going to be in the doghouse and Rashad Penny's going to be banged up for this week, we'll see what Rashad Penny looks like, but they're just going to keep throwing the ball. Like, they just stopped giving the ball to Chris Carson. They started giving it to CJ Prosise in that game. He just has fumbling issues. If you own Chris Carson in a season long, I try to trade him as soon as possible. There's concerns there for me for sure. This looks interesting. So Chris Godwin at $6,000. Like, you see the other Rams wide receivers here, but I would rather have Kupp and cash. Sterling Shepard had a good game, right? Daniel Jones actually made him viable, 100-plus yards and a touchdown. 5,800 is actually a nice price point in the slot against Washington. I really like that. Washington's cornerbacks are very poor, to say the least. Like, right now, Josh Norman, who people think he's good based on his name, he's still ranked 95th in PFF through 2 weeks and terrible last year. Chris Godwin, obviously first 2 weeks were pretty good for him. Definitely week 2, Carolina. Carolina against the slot has been an issue for them so far. But then you have the Giants. He just lays a dud. And it was really just more so because any drives were ending in big touchdowns for Mike Evans. 2 deep passes on touchdowns, and then the one around the goal line. where you saw sort of a wide receiver screen to Mike Evans, he gets in. I'm not too worried about Godwin just being dead, though. Now he gets to take on the Rams, and I think this is a decent spot. The Rams have been giving up fantasy points to slot wide receivers sort of left and right. We saw them last night not give up too many yards overall due to a just bad overall Cleveland offense, it seemed. But the guy who led the team in receiving, Jarvis Landry, out of the slot. Not a ton of volume in terms of receptions, but he still got free. And we've seen that week in and week out against the Rams so far, at least to an extent, is like their weakest point. You have Bradbury on the outside. He's usually going to be pretty good. But then we see that the Rams are not Bradbury on the outside. You have Marcus Peters and you have really a Talib on the outside. Talib's going to be the one that's a little bit better. But then when you get into the slot, you have the most beneficial matchup against them. So I do think that Chris Godwin at 6,000 is interesting. I don't think he's just dead. But because of 1 week, we saw the first 2 weeks he was being targeted the most. So I think he's fine at 6,000. It's just a matter of, like, do we like other things better? Like, we have Larry Fitz here at 5,600. That still seems too cheap. Price point only comes up 500 after getting 7 more targets and another touchdown. He just looks really good in this offense. I don't know how he can continue to perform so highly. We'll see what Allen Robinson does tonight. Minnesota, he'll probably move into the slot. He'll have Xavier Rhodes on him, but Rhodes is against elite wide receivers. I consider Robinson up there as like one of the elite wide receivers. Maybe not top 10, but very close. I do like Allen Robinson at that price tag as well. Same price point as Larry Fitz makes it interesting. Same as DJ Moore. A lot of guys priced at the same range. Christian Kirk at 51 seems interesting to me. Yeah, this is actually a really nice price point for Kirk. He's just going to continue to see like double-digit targets. He is, like Larry Fitz is doing well out there, but he is the favorite target, I would say, of Kyler Murray, who just looked terrible in the second half. And really, that's why Christian Kirk, who had like 8 catches in the first half, that whole offense suffered in the second half. Anything cheap down here? Emmanuel Sanders against Jacksonville, tough matchups there if he gets shadowed by Ramsey and or Boye. I'll say this about Emmanuel Sanders. I got him wrong last week, but if you watched after my One That Dude video, in my Final Thoughts video, in my Awesemo show on both days, and then on my Final Show live stream, I kept saying, look, Emmanuel Sanders, I was high on him. Not as high now because it seems like Jair Alexander has a real chance to follow him around. Shutdown corner for the Packers. And yes, he is a shutdown corner. He's very good. And that's exactly what happened. He followed him into the slot, and Emmanuel Sanders saw no targets. So just make sure to like follow later on in the week. What do we got? Ooh, this is juicy. Yeah, Scary Terry, whatever people are calling him, Terry McLaurin. He plays tonight. I saw somebody say like the McLaren, whatever, F15. I don't know what the hell they call these cars, but the McLaren people are calling him now because he's so goddamn fast. Really cool name, actually. But yeah, Terry McLaurin, he's going to play tonight in a tough matchup for sure against the Bears. Hopefully that gets people off of him for GPPs because then he gets the Giants, which is probably one of the top 3, if not the easiest matchup for wide receivers. If he gets Janoris Jenkins against him, that's fantastic. If you guys still think Janoris Jenkins is a good cornerback, you're just basing it off of 3 or 4 years ago in his name value. Look at his PFF grades. He's been terrible. He just got cooked left and right by Mike Evans last week. And Scary Terry's only 4,500. It's beyond me why this guy is so cheap. Through the first 2 weeks, getting actual wide receiver 1 type usage, around 8 targets a game. Again, I'm not expecting much out of him tonight. Hopefully he stays healthy, though, and I'd be very fine playing him in cash next week against a really porous Giants secondary. So we have 5,350 left over. I'm liking the way we get our lineup because we get a quarterback and a tight end against very poor defenses, right? That's what you want to target. Quarterback with rushing upside. Not trying to pair them in terms of any correlation. It's just the way it worked out. Get 2 top end running back in McCaffrey, 100% of the snaps, lots of usage. Get a top running back in terms of his matchup against Miami, 236 rushing yards a game, ridiculous. Chris Godwin, I think, is the one that so far scares me the most, but I'm not really scared. Like, he had a poor game. I think Chris Godwin, more times than not, has a ceiling or an average of 8 targets. It just happened to be Mike Evans' week. He exploded, right? That was the better matchup that they wanted to go after. Mike Evans versus Jenkins, and it obviously worked out. This week in the slot against the Rams seems like the most favorable spot to be targeting the Rams' defense. McLaurin, we already said it, McLaren, I'll call him, just because he's so fast. I love that name. I like that spot. What else we got at cheap wide receivers? You got Corey. No, I don't want no fucking Corey Davis. I don't even know why I said that. Adam Humphries. I don't want to play him against Atlanta, but we finally saw him being utilized more and more last week. The concern was that Delaney Walker in the middle of the field was taking away his usage, which it seemed like, but then they said they wanted to get him more involved, and they kind of went out of their way to do so. DK Metcalf. I don't want to get too many Seattle guys. Curtis Samuel is interesting. So Curtis Samuel with the backup quarterback still saw 7 targets last week. Last year, when you date back, he had a touchdown catch as well from Kyle Allen. A lot of the success last week, I'm going to say, was because of the Arizona matchup. It's just so good. $4,600 though for a playmaker who I guess he's not more so a cash type player. But again, I'm on a first look here and I don't want this to take an hour. Like the other guys that I look at in this range don't seem that great. Emmanuel Sanders seems okay. But again, he's going to face another kind of shutdown corner in either Ramsey and potentially AJ Boye. So I don't want to go there. Then these other guys just don't stand out. You're going to get DJ Shark maybe facing Chris Harris. $5,100 Kirk is interesting. What happens? How much money do we have left over if we have Kirk in here? 56 is going to get you like to a lower tier of running back, I imagine, right? Hey, you can get Larry Fitz, but I don't want both of them. Yeah, I don't want Sony Michel. He only played like 17 snaps last week. If you own Sony Michel in the season long, I get rid of him. Yeah, Kirk's not letting us get to any decent type of running back, at least not that I'm seeing. Let's go back to Curtis Samuel and see what we can do at running back. We have $6,100 left over. I like to get running backs in the flex because, like, if you get a running back who gets 18 to 20 carries on the ground, a couple of targets in the air, that's a lot better than hoping that a wide receiver gets you 6 targets, at least most weeks, in my opinion, for cash purposes. Wow, a couple of options here. So we have Marlon Mack and Lenny Fournette. Marlon Mack at home after Dalvin Cook just torched up this Oakland Raiders run defense. That was actually pretty good the first 2 weeks. Marlon Mack playing injured, still touches the ball 18 times total. 2 in the air, which is good to see, running a lot of routes out there. Gets in the end zone. I kind of like the Marlon Mack play. Obviously, we can fit him, so this lineup looks decent. Let's look at Leonard Fournette, though. Leonard Fournette is as inefficient as it gets, ineffective, right? He ends up having 4.4 yards per carry, but it all came on a 69-yard touchdown, right? Otherwise, he has negative 3 yards on the day, which is crazy to think about. But this is what I want to look at. Look at this. 4 catches, 6 catches. Right now, he's second only behind Le'Veon Bell in routes run at the running back position. Second. He's run 91 routes as a running back. That's ridiculous. That's crazy. I saw that stat. So he's top 2 in routes run. He's just running a ton of routes. He's lining up as a receiver even on some plays, and he's just getting targeted a lot, especially Gardner Minshew the last 2 weeks, just of full games, 14 targets. That's fantastic as a running back. So at $6,000, Leonard Fournette's floor, if he's going to continue to see 4 catches a game or more, is like 6 points in the receiving game. I guess you can say his floor in the running game is like 4 points, right? So if you're going to get a 10-point floor out of Leonard Fournette for cash, that seems pretty good. So I guess my biggest concern here is, like, do I go Leonard Fournette or Marlon Mack? That's a decision that right now I guess you'll take the home team, and I imagine he's favorited against Oakland. I haven't looked at the lines fully yet. Rather than going to Denver on the road. Denver, we've seen shut down running backs left and right. They shut down the Green Bay rushing attack for a good part of that game. The only real reason that you saw a really good fantasy game for Aaron Jones is because he had 2 1-yard rushing touchdowns. So for the most part, yards per carry, they really shut down Jones and Jamal Williams. So I'll stick to the home favorite of Marlon Mack and be another week healthier. So this is it. We get Russell Wilson, who I feel really good about in his matchup, along with his teammate Will Dissly. Again, not stacking them. It just so happened to work that way. 2 elite running backs, in my opinion, based on their matchups. McCaffrey elite just because he is, right? The usage that he has in that offense, 100% of the snaps. Austin Eckler because of the matchup against Miami, 236. I might be wrong on that number. It might be more. But when I did the quick math, 236 rushing yards per game. Miami has given up through 3 weeks. Just crazy. Chris Godwin, I feel good about this. You can probably get somewhere else if you don't feel good about Chris Godwin, but in this range, I do like Chris Godwin. You can get to Kenny Golladay if you want. I like Godwin in the slot against the Rams where you attack them more so in the slot to move the ball. Jameis is always a concern as the quarterback there, but I think it'll be okay. McLaurin, just way too cheap for cash. Hopefully he stays healthy tonight. They play on Monday night against a very good Bears defense overall. So I hope he stays healthy in this matchup against Janoris Jenkins. He should shred him apart. You have Curtis Samuel, which is probably the weakest part of this lineup, I would say, just for cash purposes. Maybe we find somebody else at the cheap wide receivers as the week goes on. But for right now, I'll leave it as Curtis Samuel. Nothing else stands out in terms of being cash friendly. I think Preston Williams is somebody that people said I got wrong last week. I don't think so. He had 12 targets. He caught 4 of them for 68 yards. I said 3 for 60, but he caught another one. 10.8 fantasy points from a guy this cheap is okay, especially when he has 12 goddamn targets. Dropped 2 passes, and then the one was a touchdown that they should have reviewed. It actually should have been a touchdown. So the man should have had 18 fantasy points pretty easily. I don't know why they didn't review that touchdown. It probably would have stand as no touchdown, but it was worth reviewing. Will Dissly, I like Marlon Mack in the flex we talked about. Then a cheap Panthers defense. Panthers defense doesn't go against anything I have, right? Nope, I have Curtis Samuel, so that's fine. All right, this is where we're at. Hopefully this first look video was informative. Hopefully it gave you an idea of where I'm at to start the week. Again, this is my first time looking at it. What do you think about the first look lineup? Where are you going with it? I appreciate it. I'll be checking the YouTube comments sparingly now as more and more people comment. It's hard to keep up with, honestly, but I try to answer every single person. I've done that so far. Even if you're negative, usually I'll block you, but I'll answer you to an extent. So thank you. Appreciate it. My name's Sal. Best of luck in the Monday night slate if you're watching this or whenever you're watching this. Thank you for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button before you go. You can follow me on Twitter at SalVetriDFS. Other than that, peace out, gang.
Hey, hold up. 1 second. Check out this page. If you haven't yet subscribed, hit the subscribe button, all right? And if you're interested in Patreon, if you're not already a Patreon, you can hit that button on Patreon, become a Patreon. It will take you right there. You can also check me out on Twitter at SalVetriDFS. And hey, if you're interested, this next video that's about to pop up, why don't you check it out as well. See ya.